Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. So for today's video, we are going to go over a buyer's guide for the Ford Ranger. Now behind me is the all-new 2024 Ford Ranger. I have a full detailed review on this exact truck. So if you'd like to see all of those specs in greater details, definitely take a look at that separate full review video. But today we're going to go over a lot more information as far as all the generations go, when the Ford Ranger first came out, and some other info that you need to know for this mid-size truck. So if you're in the market for the Ford Ranger, hopefully today's video can help you further decide if this is the right truck for you. So let's first start off with a little bit of history with the Ford Ranger and where it came from. So the Ford Ranger in general, this was the first compact pickup truck that Ford introduced. Before that, this was called the Ford Courier. So it was actually produced by Mazda at the time. The Courier was introduced in 1952 and it ran until about 2013. There were also 4 different generations for the Courier spanning during those years. And the Courier was first introduced with a 1.8 liter overhead cam engine with 74 horsepower and 92 pound-feet of torque. There was a 4-speed manual, an optional 3-speed automatic, and then there was also a 5-speed manual that was introduced later in 1976. Now the Courier in general didn't have too many exterior design changes. However, there were some subtle badge changes over the years. The Courier started off with Courier on the tailgate, and then it went to a Courier badge on the hood, and then the Ford logo was introduced on the hood and the tailgate. And in 1977, it did finally receive an upgraded refresh, as well as increasing the engine to a 2-liter 4-cylinder. Now the Courier was never offered in 4-wheel drive for the US market, so we only had 2-wheel drive. However, even back then at the time, there were aftermarket companies who would provide a 4-wheel drive system for this vehicle. So in 1975, they were adding a transfer case as well as a solid axle, and they were being sold as the Ford Courier Sasquatch. So even with the models that you see today, Ford Bronco Sasquatch, that dates back all the way to 1975 when they added that Sasquatch package providing the 4-wheel drive system. Now from what I found, there were only 1,500 of the Courier models that had the Sasquatch package. And then in 1978, Ford actually introduced it with full-time 4-wheel drive, or the 4-wheel drive system, effectively putting those aftermarket companies out of business because you could go to the Ford dealer and buy it already with that 4-wheel drive system. Now in 1971, Ford actually entered into a partnership with Mazda to import their B-Series truck to compete with Toyota and Nissan in the small truck world. From 1972 to 1976, this was the first generation for this truck. It featured a 4-cylinder, a 4-speed manual. It also had a payload capacity of 1,600 pounds. For a small truck back in that time, that was a big deal. Using this for farm equipment, any type of job or working situations like that, 1,600 pounds was a very respectable payload capacity for this size. And then for the next generation, it went from 1977 till 1985, a little bit more of a boxy design to it, as well as a few more engine options. And then in 1982, it was actually discontinued for the US market. However, the Gen 3 and Gen 4 were available in Australia and some other markets for that remaining time until 2013. Now comes the introduction for the Ford Ranger. 1983 until 1992 was the first generation year for the Ford Ranger in the United States. This was a 2-door vehicle. MSRP for this back in the late 80s was $6,200. For 2024, that would equivalent to around $23,000, which is very, very inexpensive. We do have the Ford Maverick, which is even smaller than the Ranger today, which still costs even more than that $23,000. Very interesting to see for the pricing, of course. Payload was still 1,600 pounds, which was very impressive. And then in 1989, there was a mid-cycle refresh for this car. It did offer an inline 4-cylinder as well as a V6 and a diesel engine too. And as well as a few different engine options, there were also a lot of different trim levels. Some of the trims that you see in today's vehicles as well. There was an S, Ranger was actually a trim level, XL, XLS, and then XLT. The model behind me is actually an XLT. So some of those trim levels have been around for several decades. Now, fast forward to the second generation for the Ford Ranger. It went from 1992 until 1997. Now, this generation didn't share any body panels with the existing or the first generation Ford Ranger. It shifted to a smaller production of the F-Series trucks. So Ford really wanted to incorporate their larger trucks that they had with the smaller truck to give it some of those similar capabilities as one of their full-size F-Series. Now this truck had a 2.3 liter as well as 2 V6 options, 5-speed manual, And then in 1997, a 5-speed automatic was also available. And now that leads us on to the 4th generation for the Ford Ranger. This is the 2024 year model. For this model year, there's actually 3 different engine options now available. Only 1 transmission, you get the 10-speed automatic. But for the engines, there's a 2.3 liter EcoBoost inline 4-cylinder, 270 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. You can also opt for the 2.7 liter EcoBoost V6 with 315 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque. And then for the last engine option, I believe it's only available for the all-new Ford Ranger Raptor. This is a 3 liter EcoBoost V6 with 405 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque. So you obviously have a huge horsepower and torque discrepancy from the very first Ranger that was produced. So obviously it's gone up a lot for this truck, and it's a good healthy amount for this. Now, MSRPs for the Ford Ranger start right around $32,000. So compared to that roughly $23,000 in today's market, it has increased a good bit since that time. So let's go ahead and hop into this all new Ford Ranger. And again, I have a full review of this exact truck. So if you'd like to see all the details on this XLT, definitely take a look at that down in the description. But now I want to move on to any recalls or issues to point out with the Ford Ranger. Now, I've never owned a Ford Ranger, I've never owned a Ford, so this is just what I've been able to find. If you've had any of these issues in your other vehicles, let us know. But of course, it's just what I have found, so I don't have a number on how many vehicles. But what I've found from any recalls or issues, 10-speed automatic is something that has had some issues. Now, I don't have all the full details on that because I don't think it's not exactly easy to find on that, but I know that maybe some of the shifting with the 10-speed automatic, it's a lot of gears, but from the vehicles that I've driven, it seems that it's nice, but I think there are some gear hunting issues with the 10-speed. Hopefully for 2024, that has been all squared away. Now, 2 other things that I found, some fuel lines and then the HVAC system. I wasn't able to find any pricing or anything on this, so I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's just a few minor things that I found that you need to look out for. Obviously, that's not going to be every single vehicle. I didn't find a certain statistic on X amount of vehicles being affected. This was just some things to look out for. For the 24-year model year, I don't think any of these are a concern. Just let me know down below. This truck is still new, so not a lot of people actually own them yet, but this was just a few things to maybe look at. Obviously, every vehicle might have something or some issue with it, so it doesn't look like there are too many significant issues with this all new Ford Ranger. But now let's go ahead and get this truck out on the road and we'll see how it drives. And so jumping behind the wheel now for the all new Ford Ranger, again, I made a full detailed review, so if you want to see more of my driving impressions, power and everything like that, check out that separate full review video. But this is what it's like to be behind the wheel of the all new Ford Ranger. It's been a while since I've been in the Ranger in general, but I really like these subtle updates that this 24 model year has had, especially with this all new screen and being able to go through all of that information. But this is a great mid-sized truck. I'm really glad that Ford decided to bring it back in a world where the mid-size truck platform is very, very popular. Obviously, larger pickup trucks are just as popular too, but it really just depends on what you need to use your vehicle for. Personally, I am a mid-size truck kind of person. I don't need the capabilities of having a vehicle as large as a full size, as much as that can be good in towing and things like that. For me, off-roading, hauling some smaller items, mid-size truck is a good platform. It's much easier to park, things like that. So it just boils down to what you need. But for the Ford Ranger here, I think it's a really good option. We are in an XLT right now, so you do have a few other options that you can get, of course. And it drives very nice. I am impressed with the amount of room that this truck has as well, both for your front and rear passengers. So for its smaller size, you know, it's what you'd expect for a smaller truck, of course, but it's something that is doable and fairly spacious for its size. But it rides very nice. Not a lot of wind noise, road noise. It's a good place to be. My only gripe with it, for the price of this particular model with the XLT, is that it does have a turnkey, so there's no smart key option for this particular truck, which would be nice to see. That's not the only vehicle brand to offer the turnkey. There are some other competitors that still do have the turnkey, but for 2024, it'd be nice to see a push button. But that's my only gripe. It's not really a big deal. Some people do like having the turnkey option. But I will say too that this vehicle has a good amount of power. While Ford and a lot of other companies are going away from the NA engines, they're ditching some of the V6s, the Ford does offer that for the two other engine options. So it is nice depending on what you would like. We have the 2.3 liter in this specific truck, so you can get more horsepower. But with this base engine, I feel like it's adequate enough. I've been in some other competitors with a similar horsepower and torque, and it is more than the outgoing V6. So a slight acceleration, I mean, you don't even have to think about it. It's not a 0 to 60 vehicle, but it's definitely got that pep that you're looking for in a truck, especially in today's world. So it drives nice. We have some good engine options, and you have plenty of space. So how do you know if you're in the market for the Ford Ranger? Well, there are a lot of midsize trucks available: Toyota Tacoma, Nissan Frontier, Chevrolet Colorado, GMC Canyon. We have a lot. There's also the smaller version too. You can get the Ford Maverick if you want something even smaller. But there's a lot of different engine options, or there's a lot of different models out there for sure for the midsize truck. It just boils down to brand loyalty, what interior layout works best for you. I do know that the seating position is very, very different across the board. So really, which one do you fit in best, and are you most comfortable in driving? Because obviously this is where you're spending a lot of your time, and you definitely want to be sure that you are comfortable. So I'm 5'10". You could be pushing 6 feet tall with how I have the seat currently at the moment, but it can lower. If you are taller than me, you still have a decent amount of headroom. But this is the all-new Ford Ranger. I hope you enjoyed today's video with the buyer's guide for this. If you have any questions, let me know. It's a brand new truck still, so I don't think there'll be too many owners with them at the moment. But if you do have your hands on one, comment down below. Let me know if I missed anything or how you're just enjoying the truck in general. And I hope you found this video to be helpful on your next decision for the midsize truck world with the Ford Ranger. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a huge thumbs up. Consider smashing that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our daily uploads. I will see you all in the next video.